この国を救いに来た。俺の名はドン・キホーテ・ドフラミンゴ。
Yes, you heard it right. Onamae wa Don Quixote Doflamingo. And I'm here to tell you the story of Dressrosa. Last we left off, we were in the desolate, icy tundra of Punk Hazard, working to put a stop to Caesar Clown's BioWare and unethical experimentation on humans. Unlike the East Blue in the New World, all of our enemies are part of a massive scheme, an arms-dealing operation. This interconnects the clumsy scientist Caesar to the one they call Joker. We've heard his voice in Sabati, seen him briefly in Marineford, but now as the up-and-coming rookie, Luffy puts himself in the middle of this operation, we finally come face to face with Don Quixote Doflamingo. In an effort to follow through with his alliance with Law and rescue our new friend Kinyamon's ally Kanjuro, Luffy butts heads with the most powerful enemy yet. As Doflamingo's hold on the kingdom of Dressrosa comes into question, we as the audience are faced with themes of coups, colonization, and unjustifiable violence towards those who dissent. Where do supremacist ideologies take us, and what stories in our own world may be referencing the former celestial dragon's tyranny? But before we get into that, go ahead and subscribe if you dare. I have TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, Discord. On Patreon, you get to have exclusive content from Doflamingo, myself, how I make videos just like this from start to finish. You get outlined scripts, full videos, early access to videos before anyone else does for both my gaming and my commentary channel. Or you can just do $1 over there on Patreon or here on YouTube, where you get cute emotes. You can put them in the chat. So, or you can do none of that. It's all up to you. I'll give you a choice for once. Normally, I wouldn't do such a thing. Normally, I just lock you in the gulag and leave it at that because I don't know where I'm going with this bit. Anyways, Doflamingo is a fascist. Before the establishment of the world government, the Don Quixote family had historic control over the kingdom of Dressrosa. During their rule, they enslaved the Tonta tribe, and when the Void Century came around, the Don Quixote family helped defeat the Great Kingdom, something that has been prohibited from research and erased from history, as we see in Ines Lobby with Robin's backstory. After this, the 20 kingdoms that fought, including the Don Quixote family, formed the world government. They abandoned Dressrosa to live in Marijois. Someone corrected me last time, and so I'm trying to honor their correction, but if I'm being quite honest, I still don't know how to say it. Marijois. Hundreds of years later, Doflamingo was born to this noble family. After 8 years of his life, his father, Don Quixote Homing, abdicated his status as a celestial dragon to become a normal citizen. He wanted to live a humble, peaceful life among humanity. Doflamingo, who was already socialized as a god, used to growing up as slaves and demanding subservience from commoners, resented his father immensely and struggled to assimilate to his new life. They settled on an island in the North Blue, living in a manor and on financial assets provided by the world government. The island, however, that they landed on had deep hatred for the celestial dragons. Shortly after they arrived, their manor was burned to the ground and they were forced to go on the run. Homing tried to contact the world government to save his sons, but they coldly hung up on him. The boys resorted to finding food out of trash cans and stole food for their sick mom, who would eventually die in a shack. The 3 remaining household members were caught by the town, crucified, and beaten. While up on the cross, the young Doflamingo blamed his father for their situation and swore to kill all of the commoners in revenge. His supreme king Haki was awakened in that moment, knocking out all of the citizens Doflamingo's ascent into piracy began when Trebol gave him the Ito Ito no Mi and his signature pistol. With this new weapon, he killed his own father for subjecting him and his brother Rosiante to this disgraceful life of a commoner. He took his father's head back to Mary Joie, hoping to get his status as a celestial dragon back, but they refused, calling the Don Quixote family traitors. However, Doflamingo was considered a threat as he was armed with the knowledge of Mary Joie's national treasure, and the world nobles tried desperately to kill them, but failed. I was honestly confused myself as to what this national treasure could be. It's a little bit cryptic. There are theories about it being Emu or Uranus, which is another weapon of mass destruction like Poseidon or the Pluton. Honestly, it being Emu would make sense because, as we see in Egghead, whenever you know who Emu is, they kill you on sight. Unless you're Sabo and you're an absolute king, absolute stealth master. But other than that, they kill you on sight, girl. For years after, he spent time forming the new Don Quixote family, which consisted of 12 members or disciples. He invents this space defined by unbridled loyalty to him as a god king. Through this relationship, they helped him carry out this revenge against the world nobles who rejected him through blackmail and theft from these elites. This blackmail granted him protection as one of the 7 warlords. He used these same tactics to take over Dressrosa once again. Doflamingo came to the current king, Rico's window one night, and demanded 10 billion berries, or risk a coup. Rico agreed, of course, forcing his citizens to give up their money to make up for the lack of funds that the palace had, without telling them of the threat. Despite this, most citizens still trusted the king's intentions. However, Doflamingo had no intention of keeping his promise and used his devil fruit powers to control Rico and his soldiers and force them to rampage and murder the civilians. Doflamingo took advantage of the confusion and mistrust coming out of the shadows to present himself and his subordinates as the heroes. They took hold of the castle, kidnapped Princess Viola, and established the Don Quixote family's control over Dressrosa, which we see the Straw Hats confront in the present moment. The Doflamingo regime was one of unspoken fear, a guise of prosperity hiding fascism, similar to a Donald Trump figure, which actually kind of reminds me of this video by Noon On. I'm not sure that he makes videos anymore. I don't think he's made videos in several months at this point, but he has a similar video about who in the One Piece universe would be Doflamingo, or would be Donald Trump. If you want to watch that, you can. I'll probably put it in the little iCard if I remembered to do that. I don't know. But similar, like I said, to a Donald Trump figure, Doflamingo claimed the former king was responsible for making the country poor and promised wealth to the people. It's a classic fascist setup. That's how they get you. He sold arms to various factions to instigate wars, aligned with Caesar Clown and Kaido, as we see in Punk Hazard. The Smiles were a big part of Punk Hazard and eventually Wano's storyline, as they ended up creating this special grade of zone power users, but also this new form of segregation. He had his subordinates hunt down anyone with a previous affiliation to the king. Sugar, a member of the Don Quixote family, turned dissidents into toys, erasing their past and making their loved ones forget them. In turn, he used this divide to create laws that segregated the toys from the humans. He just loves a little bit of segregation, doesn't he? He also reestablished his ancestors' practice of slave labor. He not only resubjugated the Tonta tribe as well as the toys, who both manufactured his smiles. Now, normally when discussing fascism, I talk about countries like Israel, which are currently upholding fascist regimes, which you can definitely make connections to Doflamingo and the state of Israel with this arc. But I decided to take this opportunity to actually learn about a new fascist regime. Well, they're not new at all, but you understand what I'm saying. I've never heard, I didn't know it exists. I actually struggled a lot with figuring out how to analyze Dressrosa. I could see there were politics there, but I wasn't sure how I could analyze it in a way that I hadn't already discussed in a previous video. It wasn't until I did some digging up on Reddit, which is the best place to find information. Honestly, I can't tell if I'm saying that as a bit or to be sarcastic or if I really mean it. it's hard to know sometimes because they do help me fix my computer a lot. Like a lot. And they also helped me with this, but I also consulted when I talked to Vincent Chanzard. He also told me about how Dressrosa, was very similar to what Trump is doing with, his fascist tactics of sending people away to El Salvador and all of that. And I was like, girl, you're eating. You're eating. And so here we are. I landed on a political avenue for this video that made sense and we don't have to pass. I was never going to pass because, girl, I have to dress as Doflamingo. I had to. It really, the energy of Doflamingo really brings out the cuntiness. It really brings it out. Like, you feel bad. I needed that. Today we were talking about Spain's dictatorship under Francisco Franco and the Second Republic. Now, Francisco Franco was the fascist dictator of Spain who upheld Cristo nationalism and ruled until his death in 1975. In his early years, he volunteered to fight an insurgency in the Spanish colony at the time, Morocco. He became the youngest general at the age of 33 in all of Europe and was later chosen to direct the newly founded General Military Academy. Spain started to embrace fascism before Franco's rule, though. From 1923 to 1930, King Alfonso VIII embraced a military dictatorship. Municipal elections were held in April 1931, which disposed the king and ushered in the Second Republic. The Second Republic was more left-leaning and aimed to turn Spain into a secular democracy. These Republican candidates passed measures that reduced the power of the military, the Catholic Church, and property-owning elites. Franco was reprimanded by this party for criticizing their actions and was sent to an outpost and eventually had his General Military Academy shut down. Both the Second Republic and the Spanish Right had a bit of a back and forth in maintaining power. After a center-right coalition won the election in 1933, Franco got back in the good graces of the government. Under their rule, he was able to deploy troops from Morocco to northern Spain to suppress a leftist revolt, turning the military on the people. This incident left 4,000 dead and tens of thousands imprisoned. After this horrifying incident, Franco was promoted, becoming the Army Chief of Staff. Little did he know, in 1936, the leftist coalition would come back into power, and that is whenever Franco and other military leaders began discussing a coup. Franco was emboldened to carry out the coup after the assassination of Jose Calvo Sotelo, a radical monarchist. The military officers launched an uprising that eventually secured them the western half of the country. During this time, Franco made contacts. He was doing a little bit of networking with Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy, securing arms and other assistance, which continued throughout what is known as the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939. Franco unified a base of support by securing the backing of the Catholic Church, combining the fascist and monarchist political parties, and dissolving all other political parties. His men went on a tear, massacring thousands of Republicans. Tens of thousands of political prisoners were executed by nationalists, and despite the Republican support from the Soviet Union and the execution of their own political opponents, they were no match for the nationalists. They surrendered in Madrid in March of 1939, effectively giving power to Franco. Life under the Franco regime was kind of similar to a, little bird-like fella that we know. It was one of fear and unbridled death. Many Republicans fled in the wake of the Civil War, and those who were left were tried. Those tribunals sent thousands of Spaniards to their deaths. Franco admitted in the 1940s that he had 26,000 political prisoners. Under the Franco regime, Catholicism was the only tolerated religion, and he did his own little bit of ethnic cleansing, banning the Catalan and Basque languages outside the home, and also forbidding Catalan and Basque names for newborns. He barred labor unions and created a vast secret police network to spy on citizens. Franco at first declared neutrality in World War II, but later approached Hitler, expressing his willingness to join Germany's side. Hitler refused, remarking he would as soon have 3 or 4 teeth pulled out than go through another bargaining session like that again. Franco still remained sympathetic to the Axis powers and sent 50,000 volunteers to fight alongside the Germans on the Soviet front. Post-World War II was another story, though. He really didn't have any allies after the United Nations was formed. He was labeled the last surviving fascist dictator, but despite this, in the Cold War, his relations with other countries regularized as he was one of the leading anti-communist statesmen. Despite him being a gruesome dictator, the United States entered a 10-year assistance pact with Spain in 1953. Franco also allowed the US to expand its imperialist project during the Cold War with 3 air bases and a naval base in return for economic aid. I mean, I don't need to say this too much again because I feel like I repeat myself a little too much, but you get it. America bad. It doesn't really matter what the frick a country has done. They are willing to look over it. We kind of discussed this in the last video, Punk Hazard, and how they literally didn't prosecute the Japanese fascist war crimes in exchange for their research that they did in an effort to do like a democide on the Chinese people. It's a whole thing. America bad. Doesn't matter if you are a ruthless person, they will side with you as long as you're anti-communist, obviously. That has been proven time and time again. And like I said, Franco ruled Spain until he died in 1975. Which is pretty insane because, like I said, I've literally never heard of this man until I saw his name on Reddit. But there are a lot of aspects of both the Franco and Doflamingo regimes that are similar. I sectioned them off into 3 categories: political similarities, environment, and religion. Both regimes were formed with a coup or overthrow of the previous regime. Franco weaponized his influence in the military to start the Spanish Civil War, while Doflamingo did a bit of a more subtle coup, if you will, weaponizing his devil fruit to manipulate the current king into murdering and betraying his people. They both suppressed dissent from their opposition. Franco imprisoned and murdered thousands of Republicans and leftists. Doflamingo imprisoned, murdered, and created a system of segregation to suppress dissent. They both engaged in arms dealing and imperialism. Franco lent aid to both Hitler and the US. Also, Spain was in control of Morocco, and also provided space for military bases and volunteers for war. Doflamingo did arms dealing with Kaido and weapons manufacturing with Caesar Clown. Dressrosa also shares a lot of similarities culturally and environmentally with Spain. One of the first views we see is Princess Viola flamenco dancing, a traditional art form from southern Spain. There are tropical plants and similar flora in a lot of the shots of Dressrosa to Spain. It also has a similar Spanish colonial architecture. There's actually a Reddit post that relates the colorful buildings in Dressrosa to Park Güell in Barcelona, Spain. This arc also includes, I'm not sure if you guys picked up on it whenever you watched it, but this arc also includes tons of religious symbolism, which could point to Franco's allying with the Catholic Church and Christofascism. Oda is constantly arranging Doflamingo in positions that present him as Jesus. As a former celestial dragon, Doflamingo, similar to Jesus, is a god who came down to earth and became a human. He, his father, and his brother are crucified, but he's not necessarily in the position of Jesus at that moment. It's actually his father who is in the middle in the position of Jesus, while he is on the, what would that be, like the left side, technically. There's also a frame in the manga where the newly formed Doflamingo family is arranged in the position of the Last Supper painting by Da Vinci. Doflamingo in this instance is positioned in Jesus' spot, with Trebol in the position of Judas. Although there could be debate that Corazon is the true Judas, as he is a spy for the Marines and portraying his own brother. Also, in this frame, 12 disciples sit around the table. Now, I struggle to understand Oda's intentions behind this symbolism. I feel like there's a lot you can interpret from it. Obviously, it adds to the cultural and political symbolism, with Spain being a mostly Catholic country, and also Franco, if he is to be Doflamingo or the closest analog, trying to uphold Catholicism. But I wasn't sure if it was also a commentary on Doflamingo himself. Does Dofi believe he's a Jesus-like figure, but he's truly, an antichrist or whatever? Does he believe he's some sort of messiah or leader for some greater cause? I mean, he is a narcissist, so I suppose, you know, it could be read that way. When being crucified, like I said, he wasn't in Jesus' position, but by killing his father, who was in that frame, he fabricated this image maybe that he was Jesus. He was able to then mold himself in that position, if that makes sense. Now that the actual Jesus was dead, I don't know. Because obviously Doflamingo is a awful person. So it's hard to imagine, you know, Jesus was a communist, as we all know, as we all famously know. Right-wingers love Jesus, but they would, if he was alive today, they would hate his guts. They would be the ones hanging him up on a freaking crucifix if he was alive. That dude was such a commie. He was hanging out with prostitutes, freaking helping the poor and the blind, and, you know, like, he was the most commie dude you've ever seen in your life. He invented communism. Move out the way, Karl Marx. Obviously, Doflamingo is not like Jesus. I don't know, there's a lot to interpret from there. There's no way that Oda is obviously saying that he is, but like I said, maybe by killing his father, who was the real metaphorical person that is supposed to be Jesus in this situation, in this, you know, metaphor, he then is able to put himself in that position, if that makes sense. I don't know what Oda's trying to say. But like always, I like to do a little bit of an arc review after we dive into the political message of the arc. We're starting off real spicy, real strong. Dressrosa is possibly... No. Dressrosa is the worst arc, if you don't count Long Ring Longland, which really shouldn't have been a canonic arc, because what about that is canonic? What about that is necessary to the story? I'm not sure. So if we don't count that, Dressrosa is the worst arc. It has the worst pacing I've ever seen in a TV show ever. I've been talking about this for several arcs since I watched the freaking show back in like around Christmas time. I've been talking non-stop in every One Piece video about how bad this freaking arc is. I remember seeing this like TikTok or short about what each episode in Dressrosa is like, and it was just all the same clip of Rebecca's backstory back to back, which is like so accurate, because that's literally what it felt like. Toei reiterated her backstory so much, and I would say it was understandable since the arc itself spanned over, I'm pretty sure, like 2 years, but they showed it consecutively in each episode. Like, I don't need a refresher. I just saw it 20 minutes ago. It's especially annoying whenever you're, you know, like me and you're binge watching the show. I'm sure if you're going week to week, it's not as annoying, but it's still like, girl, you're padding the episode with something I just saw last week. I know what happened. You know what I mean? Like, that's outrageous. This is whenever Toei and their pacing gets really bad, but then they bring it back, because you know I'm a Toei dick rider. They bring it back, girl. They bring it back in Whole Cake Island. Honestly, well, Punk Hazard's pacing, I don't know if Punk Hazard's pacing was bad. It was just kind of boring. But Dressrosa's pacing is awful. I don't care about Zoe. Whole Cake Island brings it back, though. I was so excited, though, to see Doflamingo in action, but it ended up being a bit underwhelming. I mean, his character, I think, is exceptional, which I'll get to in a minute. But having 12 subordinates didn't help the pacing of the arc at all, which was already suffering from an onslaught of Rebecca and her family. It only made it more unbearable to consume. I understand its importance for the religious symbolism, but there were so many of them, and I wasn't invested in literally any of them, except for, surprisingly, the dude who wears the diaper. Why was his story so compelling, though? He looks like such a creep, but his story was actually the most interesting out of... I don't know if they even showed the other disciples' stories, but it was actually kind of compelling. But I wasn't invested in the other 11 of them and their fights, and so it was just unbearable to watch the whole thing. I'm pretty sure I skipped through most of those fights because I just didn't really care at all. I don't like that feeling of like anticipating the end of the arc. I want to be locked in the entire time. But Doflamingo's backstory itself was really good and made me wish that other villains like Crocodile got the same treatment. You really got a good understanding of his character and why he behaves the way that he does, in a way that other villains and enemies didn't get. He has this really warped sense of what family means due to his fascist upbringing and his narcissism. He believes he is meant to be at the center of everything, so that is the defining quality of loyalty. I also love how carefully crafted he was as a character, because especially whenever I'm pretty sure at the time I watched Dressrosa, I was in a lot of animation classes where we were talking about like character design, and just the principle in animation is your character always has to have a reason, a why for what they're doing. Everything they have to do has to make sense, and Doflamingo's just his character design is so compelling. Even with like Caesar Clown, which I mentioned last time, Oda is so freaking exceptional at making characters. You can look at the character and know exactly their vibe and what type of person they are. He's just freaking exceptional. He's exceptional at character design, exceptional at writing. The dude, I don't know how the man does it. Like, some of us are just gifted, I guess. It kind of makes me jealous. Some of us are some of us just got it. And some of us don't, I guess. I don't know how it works. But obviously the way he walks and dresses, it's kind of silly, but it all conveys flamingo, since that's in his name. I also love the detail that you never see him without his glasses. Like, there is a point where in the backstory, whenever he was younger, he takes off his glasses while he's napping, I believe. You still do not see his eyes. And I think that's so interesting. I don't know if it's like a lack of vulnerability, like he doesn't showing his eyes is a vulnerable state or something, because I'm sure he just has regular eyes, you know? Or is he blind in one eye? I forget isn't Doflamingo blind in one eye? Am I misremembering? It looks like him being blind in one eye is just a theory, but I could have sworn there was something in the arc that like signals that he lost one of his eyes. Anyways, I still think it's pretty freaking cool. The glasses almost become his eyes and become, the lens into his soul. I don't know why I find that so cool. I think even despite all of Dressrosa's failures, I would say he's still the best villain in One Piece. He has unlimited aura. He has the most exceptional laugh, the most exceptional bisexual energy. He's just so menacing, so amazing, so cunty, and that's why he's still my fave, even though this arc sucked doo-doo. But to dive a little bit deeper into Rebecca and talking about her and her family, every One Piece arc centers around a group of characters who most of the time are rulers of the land or previously ruled the land. Now this time we center around Rebecca and her grandfather, King Riku, her father, and a few other members of her family. Now for whatever reason, I cannot connect to them and their story. I'm not sure if it was the annoyance due to how oversaturated their storyline was, as I pointed out earlier, or if they just weren't good characters, but I just did not care about them at all. Nothing about them was compelling enough to connect to, which only made the arc more unbearable to consume. But like I said, I can't tell if that's just because they weren't good characters, like there was something about them that was missing to drive home the whole point. But honestly, the whole world of Dressrosa is very fantastical, and that to me also was hard to connect to. Like, something about the world and the universe of Dressrosa as a whole, not even just Rebecca and her family, I could not connect to. Like with Water 7, for instance, exceptional world building. You're just like amazed at the universe. Skypiea is the same thing. But with this, it's like, it's just not, something about it isn't connecting. It might just be a me thing. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments, I guess. That's what the comments are for. So ever since In His Lobby, I've been paying close attention to how Oda handles the storyline of Marines to see if it matches the perspective that cops are either forced out or killed, or stay in the force long enough to become part of the corrupt system. Sal and Aokiji are good examples of people who are either killed or leave the system, while we see other characters, most notably in recent arcs like Egghead, like Kizaru, who have been corrupted by the system and will do anything for the Five Elders. If they did have some sort of plans for justice when they came in, they have completely given in to the whims of the Five Elders and protecting the elites, especially as they have climbed the ladder. Fujitora is a fascinating character because he kind of successfully changes the system from the inside. He's introduced in the Dressrosa saga as the new admiral or replacement for Aokiji, and he comes into this position with a very stubborn mission to dismantle some of the corrupted systems he sees before him. And one of his first missions is to dismantle the 7 warlord system, which has only enabled pirates like Doflamingo to carry out weapons manufacturing and arms dealing with the protection of the Marines. And by the end of Dressrosa, he successfully dismantles the system, allowing the Marines to arrest Doflamingo. And I was trying to analyze Fujitora and see where he fits into this landscape and overarching political statement regarding the cops. And he seems to be in a similar camp to Garp, in my opinion. Garp, while he is, I believe, a vice admiral or like a former vice admiral or something like that, refuses to take a higher position in the Marines because he refuses to fully serve the 5 elders and celestial dragons. He got into this business for providing justice to people, and some part of him abhors the people he ultimately serves. But while Garp has almost given up, it seems, on changing the system, Fujitora, while abhorring the world government, still has some drive for breaking down the corruption, which ultimately will be meaningless as the institution of the Marines is built to serve the elites. So good luck with that, Fujitora. But he's still kind of cool. He's got a cool, fruit and all that. He's a cool dude. Now to my favorite characters that saved this arc. Okay, Corazon has to be one of the top 3, maybe even top 2 best characters in One Piece, hands down. No hesitation. Not only did their story, Corazon and Law's story, help to save Dressrosa from being a complete flop, but it also boosted Law as a character. Because before, I'm gonna be real honest, I mentioned this in my Sabati video, that I was like, I like Law only because I know that him and Luffy become besties. After Dressrosa, it is all complete, because before I was like a little iffy on him. I'm like, I'm not really sure why people like him, but after Dressrosa, I get it. Not only does he balance out Luffy so well, and it's like really funny and humorous because he's like so melancholy while Luffy's bubbly, but this story with Corazon, bro, was amazing. Corazon betrayed his own brother, which he was doing before he met Law anyways, but regardless, betrayed his own brother to save this kid who we just met. And it's like the sweetest, most heartwarming moment possibly in all of One Piece. That might be a stretch, I don't know. There's a lot of good moments in One Piece, especially with like Kuma and Bonnie and Ace and Luffy and all that. This man traveled across the world to find a cure for this random ass kid he just met. He put his whole life on the line and died so that Law could live. That's a real man, and he was smiling all the way through, kind of, in a way. That's like the last time you see Law smile. In the process, he became a father-like figure for Law, in which we saw this different side to Corazon. Because when we were introduced to Corazon, he was this mute, menacing figure, but he turns out to be this silly, lovable guy who's actually a spy for the Marines, which is his only flaw. I will say that. But I literally fell in love with this man. King Katakuri, I don't know what's up with me in K names. I don't know what's up with me in K sounds. K names. But King and Katakuri have nothing on this man. He is the love of my life, definitively. Definitively. Now, Franco's ruthless dictatorship is definitely a warning sign for our own future. In the US, people are being disappeared in a similar fashion. Innocents are sent to concentration camps in El Salvador, or even permanent residents are locked up for hundreds of days. I will say that it does give me hope, though, to see people like Mahmoud Khalil and Rameza Ozturk finally free after months. It proves something, perhaps about our own resilience as humans, or maybe even our own level of compassion. I'm not one to have too much faith in Americans, but perhaps I underestimate my own people too much. I don't know. We will see in the coming months. But so far, I think people have I think we could go stronger as a country. It's a bit hard to have a opposition party that doesn't really do anything, that doesn't really help the situation too much, really. But I think we as people on the streets have done a pretty decent job, I would say, at fighting back with the No Kings protest and the, protests against ICE raids all across the country, outside protesting Alligator, Alcatraz, and all of that. I think we've we've done more than I honestly expected. We might even have a, socialist mayor in New York City, unless Donald Trump is like gonna interfere in that in some way in which we're cooked completely. Possibly there's something within us that is resilient and more of a fighter than I thought. I feel like I always try in the outro to find a way to give myself hope through One Piece, maybe even give you guys a little bit of hope through One Piece. But the story of Dressrosa is ultimately, if we are to relate it to America or even other parts of Europe which are, experiencing a similar rise in fascism, Dressrosa is a very similar story of people fighting back in their own way. Luffy didn't win and, get rid of this segregation of Dressrosa and take down Doflamingo and his dictatorship alone. It was an organized fight, and that's what I love about One Piece, is that it shows the power of collective action. It is not about this one man who just, does everything by himself. He has to ally, especially in Dressrosa, he has to ally with the samurai and with the Tonta tribe and with the toys and, all of that to get this done. With Rebecca and her father, it takes an entire village to take down a empire. But I would like to give my Patreon members a shout out. My $10, my $5, I don't think I have $1 anymore, but if I do, shout out to you. If I still have YouTube members, shout out to you. You're all amazing. Some of you, like I said, have been supporting me for so long, and I do not take that for granted. So I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. But thank you all so much for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comments below of what you thought about Dressrosa. And I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.